You can probably stop buying those overpriced nursery plants. Because here's the thing, some of the most productive crops you can grow in a pot are sitting in your kitchen trash right now. I've been looking into what people are actually growing these days, and one of these crops can hand you over 12 pounds of food. From a scrap most people just toss in the bin. And the weirdest part? Almost no store will even bother to sell it to you. Now, a quick heads up before we dig in. One of these 15 has a poisonous look-alike, and I'll definitely wave a red flag the second we reach it. So, always check it against a trusted source first, and maybe just taste a little the first time. Safety first. But here's why these completely beat your common vegetables, and neither reason means more work for you. The first group, you simply regrow instead of buy. The second group, they actually do better when you feed them less. And that champion I saved for number 1, over 12 pounds of food from one single plant. I've put together a list of 15, counting all the way down to number 1. We'll cover where to find each and the pot it likes. Nothing fancy, I promise. Stick around, because number 1 is really worth the wait. So here's the rule for this first group. If you can fill a glass of water, you can start every single one of them. Just a glass of water, that's it. The store's loss kind of becomes your free harvest. Number 15, horseradish. You've probably seen everyone online warning that it takes over the whole yard. And, well, in open ground, they're right. It's kind of its own nemesis. But if you drop one grocery root into a tall, narrow pot, the pot fences it in for you. No chasing runners every spring. No angry neighbors. Just one tidy plant exactly where you put it. And the price math is pretty sweet. A grocery root costs maybe $1 or $2. A nursery crown? Often 3 or 4 times that. Just remember one rule here. Don't overdo it on the feeding. Too much and you get a jungle of leaves and these thin, stringy roots, instead of that thick, sharp root that makes your eyes water the moment you grate it. I saw that gardeners at Utah State treat it as just a simple spring planting. Don't overthink it. And the next one is almost unfair. One tiny sprig can fill a whole pot in weeks. Number 14, Cuban oregano. If there's a poster child for regrowing from a single scrap, this is it. Drop one cutting in a glass of water on the windowsill. In about a week or so, it grows a fist of roots. A month later, it can fill the whole pot. Just picture it. One tiny sprig becomes this fat, fragrant bush spilling over the rim. The thick, fuzzy leaves hold water kind of like a succulent, so it totally forgives you on the days you forget to water. Life gets busy, that's okay. And they smell warm, like oregano and thyme, every time you brush past. Just snip a 2-inch piece right above where a leaf joins the stem. Press it into fresh soil, and you basically never buy it again. Compare that to the $6 or $7 a potted herb costs at the garden center. I mean, the math really sells itself. Number 13, jicama. Now, here's that red flag I promised earlier. You only eat the root of this one. The leaves, stems, and those little seed pods, they're not safe to eat. They actually carry a natural poison. So, just snip the pods off and bin them somewhere curious hands and paws can't reach. It really matters if you have kids or dogs running around. But grow it just for that crisp, sweet root. It climbs a trellis kind of like a vine, feeds itself straight from the air, and needs no fertilizer at all. I mean, none. Give it a warm, sunny corner, and it's one of the easiest climbers you'll ever pot up. Number 12, longevity spinach. A small cutting from an Asian grocery roots really fast, even if you just have part shade. And then it just kept handing you these tender, slightly crunchy greens all season long. The more you pick, the more it pushes out. By midsummer, one little cutting basically becomes the green you keep snipping every few days. One $4 bunch from the market becomes a plant that feeds you for months. Pretty good deal, right? Number 11. The Egyptian walking onion. Forget seeds. This guy grows little bulbs right on top of its own stalk. Then it flops over and replants them itself, which is exactly how it slowly walks across the pot, maybe one step a year. And it's tough. You'll hear that a lot of these novelties are fragile. That's just not true here. Guides from cold states like Minnesota and Pennsylvania treat it as truly hardy. It just shrugs off a brutal winter and comes right back. Press a little top bulb 2 inches deep and walk away. That's it. Number 10. Water spinach. Just leave the firm stem base from a market bunch and sit it in shallow water. In 3 to 5 days, it springs right back to life. Cut it tonight, and by the weekend, it's already pushing fresh shoots back at you. Snip what you need for dinner, and the stems just keep pushing out new shoots all season long. Now, you might be wondering, don't these spreaders turn invasive? Outdoors, some really do. But in a pot, the walls quietly solve that problem for you. No special effort needed. There's no perfect way to do this, really. Just let the pot do the work. So here's the lesson from this first group. Again, if you can fill a glass of water, you can regrow every plant so far for almost nothing. But this next group is strange. The more you feed them, the worse they do. Can you guess which ones? So, did you guess? Here's the surprise. This whole next group actually does worse the more you feed it. And the reason is pretty simple once you see it. Pour on the plant food, and the plant just builds leaves instead of storing food underground. As the old line goes, too much feeding builds salad, not supper. So for these 6, the lazy move is the winning move. You just feed them less. It's really up to you, but less is definitely more here. Number 9. French tarragon. Skip the seed packet. Seed-grown tarragon is usually the bland kind, with almost no flavor at all. Instead, just split a clump gently with a thin, sharp knife in early spring. And here's the twist. Poor, dry soil is exactly what concentrates that sweet, peppery flavor that cooks pay an absolute fortune for. A specialty bunch can cost several dollars for just a few sprigs. One divided clump gives you that flavor on tap. Don't overdo it on the care. Number 8. Nasturtium. Pile on rich compost and you get a jungle of leaves and not a single flower. That rich soil? That right there? That's the culprit. All that feeding tells the plant to build leaves instead of blooms. Starve it a little, and the flowers just pour out in bright reds and oranges. Lean soil, more flowers. That's the whole trick. And both the leaves and the peppery blooms are edible. Number 7. Sweet potato. Just picture the one you forgot in the back of the cupboard, already sprouting. We've all been there. Half of it floats in a jar of water and throws out these leafy shoots. Those shoots become a grow bag full of tubers by fall. One forgotten sweet potato can seed an entire container harvest. From something you basically almost threw away. You don't need a massive garden plot, just a container. Easy as that. Number 6. The tiger nut or chufa. Just soak the dried nuts overnight, give the tray a little warmth from below to wake them up, and they basically all sprout at once. In a small pot, one carefully run trial counted around 100 little tubers. And they're sweet and nutty enough to just snack on straight from the pot. From one small pot, that's a serious haul. And this number actually comes from solid lab testing, not just some random garden lore you'll hear online. Number 5. Taro. Now, this guy is the one crop here that actually loves having wet feet. It's completely happy in a pot that sits half flooded. Start with a big seed corm for the heaviest harvest. Keep it warm, keep it wet, and it just does the rest. Tip the pot at harvest, and it literally feels like pulling dinner straight out of a swamp. Kind of fun, actually. Number 4. The peanut. Yes, raw peanuts in the shell, straight from the grocery store, will sprout. Plant them about 2 inches deep. Around day 30 or so, these cheerful little yellow flowers show up. And then comes the magic. You just mound a little soil around the base, and the flower stalks dive down to set their pods underground. The National Peanut Board says a good pot gives 30 to 40 pods from a single plant, which feels almost unfair the first time you tip it out. Think of it this way. Feeding these heavy is like making someone work overtime all day on the wrong project, and then wondering why the real job never gets done. All that energy just goes to the wrong place. And don't worry that lean soil is going to starve them. A lot of people think that, but these crops grew up in poor ground anyway. Basic potting mix is plenty. Now, before we hit the top 3, remember that promise I made earlier? One plant, over 12 pounds of food. That champion is just 3 spots away, and honestly, it might be the most hands-off crop on this entire list. Now we're gonna slow right down, because the top 3 aren't just rare. Each one can literally turn a single pot into a season of food. Number 3. Oca. These little Andean tubers come in these unreal colors, almost like tiny gems in pink, yellow, and rose. Here's the quirk though. They only fatten up once the autumn days get short. So patience really is the whole game here. A light early frost won't ruin them if you just mulch the pot a little. Keep the soil lean, mound a little soil up the stems mid-season, and a single plant can reach somewhere around 1 to 3 pounds, plus about 50 tubers. I'll be totally straight with you. That figure comes from grower trials, not a university lab. So treat it as a strong maybe. Number 2. The sunchoke or Jerusalem artichoke. This thing is just a tuber machine that keeps giving. The catch everyone hits is that it spreads really hard in open ground. So the calm fix? Just use a big grow bag or a large tub. That keeps the roots boxed in where you can actually find them. Pick a tidier variety if you want it even more polite, and it rewards you with cheerful little sunflower blooms up top before harvest. One season, and you tip out way more knobby, nutty tubers than you ever planted. I won't throw a pot number at you here, because honestly, the figures floating around online just aren't backed by solid testing yet. Number 1. The yacon. The absolute champion of the whole list. But here's the one catch most people miss. You have to plant the knobby crown pieces with the growing eyes, not the smooth eating tubers. Those just sit there and rot. Get that right, and here's the payoff. Imagine tipping a half barrel over on your patio. No greenhouse, no fancy heat mat. Just one crown planted one season earlier, and out tumbles this heavy cluster of pale, crisp roots. Over 12 pounds of them, documented by the University of California Extension from a single plant. They're juicy enough to just eat raw, kind of like an apple. Enough to fill a basket and still hand a few down the street. According to USDA data, yacon roots store a type of fiber called inulin, the kind that feeds the good bacteria in your gut. But you know, nutrient levels vary, so always check with a qualified professional for any specific dietary needs. And the best part? One crown gives you about 10 new plants for free. So you basically never buy it again. That's exactly why no store bothers to stock it. It's just too easy to grow once for free. So that's 15 rare crops, and almost every single one started from a scrap, a cutting, or a single tuber that you can probably find this week. The lesson here is pretty simple. The most productive plant in your whole garden might be the one no store even bothers to sell. The garden center wants to sell you a seedling, but your kitchen already has the starting point, completely for free. So pot up those kitchen scraps, save some money, and just have some fun with it this weekend. I actually made a free gift to go with this, the Ultimate Container Garden Success Guide. It has all the regrow from scrap steps, the crops to keep lean, and a printable harvest log. Just click the first link in the description, print it out, and pin it right beside your pots. And if this saved you even one overpriced nursery trip, share it with another gardener. Happy gardening!